Lord Charlie Falconer, former cabinet minister in that last Labour government. You shared a flat with Tony Blair when you were both young lawyers. Was it a wild flat?
Wild would not be the right way to describe it. Tony Blair was a very hard-working lawyer and also a very hard-working politician, incredibly keen to become an MP and change the world, which is what he did. I remember coming down the stairs one morning at 4 a.m, hearing a clattering around, and there was Tony Blair getting dressed, going to work, starting at 4 o'clock every morning. So he really put the hours in then, and then he put the hours in later.
God, he sounds a bit boring. You wanted to be a Member of Parliament.
I did.
But when you went for selection, obviously the process is that candidates are chosen by local Labour Party members. You sent your children to private school and they didn't like that, those members, and they didn't choose you. Do you see any contradiction between sending your kids, all now grown up, to private school and being in the Labour Party?
It's very difficult as a parent not to do what you think is best for your children. And at the time I thought what was best for my children was to send them to the best schools that they could. Schools in London were very, very bad in the 80s and 90s of the last century. Labour made a really big difference in relation to that. What I felt most strongly was I shouldn't take my children out of the schools that they were at and where they were happy in order to get selected to be an MP. I don't in any way disrespect Dudley North for saying no on that basis, but I don't think it's inconsistent with being a member of the Labour Party or being a representative in Parliament of the Labour Party in doing what is right or what you believe to be right for your children.
So you're in the Lords. If Keir Starmer becomes Prime Minister, he wants to abolish the House of Lords. Are you looking forward to being abolished? I'm
looking forward very much to being abolished and replaced by something that is elected, because look at the government at the moment. It's doing a lot of very, very difficult things. The Lords often stands up to the Commons, but can't stand up for very long, because who on earth is going to pay attention to a body which is made up either of people like me who are a flatmate of Tony Blair, or I don't know whether you think it's worse or better, it's bad in a different way, people who are, as it were, the great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren of Charles II's mistresses, and that's why they're there. We are not a body that has any legitimacy when it comes to standing up to an elected house. So in answer to your question, am I looking forward to it? Yes, I am. It's about time. And good for Keir for saying he's going to do it and do it early. Because if you don't do it early, you'll never do it.
Assisted dying, medically assisted dying, which is something you have campaigned for. You have really championed that cause. Perhaps the momentum is moving in that direction, but actually it still seems very, very far away to me. Does it to you?
It feels like it's stuck. And it's stuck because of the politicians. It's a cause that is really, everybody has an experience of somebody who is dying through an illness, who it is so obvious the time has come for them to go. And then days or weeks or months go on where there's nothing left but waiting for the end. And it's horrible. Many, many countries have made the change. We will not make the change primarily because our politicians, very few of whom came into politics to deal with assisted dying, they came in for other reasons, but they don't want to offend some vested interest, say the church in their constituency, and they just will not be brave enough to make the change. It's absolutely awful that a combination of politicians and the Church of England stop this.
You said most people have had an experience. Tell me about your
seeing people where the end is near, where they feel their time has come. Often they've said goodbye to those that they love, and you can see the drip is in, and all they're focusing on is the drip more painful than it needs to be. They've turned their face to the wall. They so desperately want the end, and we're not entitled as a matter of law to make sure that it's given. And who's the most prominent group of people against it are the bishops and the archbishops, who are well represented in the House of Lords, and it's just so wrong.
Okay, let's talk about drugs. You are leading a commission in London for the London Mayor Sadiq Khan about whether and how drugs policy should change. Just tell us a little bit about your remit and where you are with that.
The London Drug Commission is a body set up by the Mayor. We're independent, we're operating on the basis of the evidence, and we're looking to see what recommendations we should make about the way that the health service deals with drug issues, the way that the law deals with drug issues, which means not just what the courts do, but also should the framework of the law be changed. And we're focusing in particular on cannabis. Now, this is motivated not because of lots of recreational drug users, but because over 30 or 40 years, there's been a quote, war on drugs. And the consequence of the war on drugs is a lot of people have become addicted to a whole variety of drugs. They've died in very many occasions. The war has manifestly failed in relation. I was in charge of the justice system between 2003 and 2007. We were heavily engaged on a, quote, war on drugs. What was the consequence? Billions of dollar industry was placed in the hands of criminals. They exploited lots and lots of people, not just the users, but young people particularly who they dragged into criminality and changed and ruined their lives. Would it be better if it became a health problem, not a criminal justice problem? Would it be better if instead of all sorts of drugs on the street that are incredibly dangerous because they're not regulated, they're coming through crooks, instead of people having skunk everywhere that's completely ruining their lives, what about possibly regulating the sorts of cannabis that are on sale? I've reached no conclusions in relation to this. The effect of decriminalising is that the numbers of people who use cannabis goes up. The question, and we need to look at the evidence in relation to this, and I've got no conclusions, if you increase the number but you reduce the damage it's done, is that a equation that is worth looking at? And it's very, very difficult, but we need to look at it because the one thing I think everybody agrees on is that the war has failed.
Okay, thank you. Just to bring you to current day politics, something you've been speaking about, the UK government has blocked Nicola Sturgeon's gender recognition reform bill. She is in charge of Scotland. Is that right?
Well, she's in charge of Scotland. She's entitled to determine what are the conditions by which you get a gender recognition certificate, which is something that is a formal document that says your gender is now man or woman, different to what your biological gender would be. I think everybody who's looked at the issue thinks that transgender people need to be treated fairly and not discriminated against, and getting that piece of paper means a lot to them, and it's too difficult. So her reform is a sensible one. But women quite legitimately feel if, for example, I am in a group that is providing services for somebody who's the victim of a sexual assault, I don't want a transgender woman in that group, particularly if she's still got male genitalia. The terrible case of the rapist who was placed in a women's prison in Scotland. These are utterly legitimate fears that women have. So how do you balance the legitimate fears of women about trans women against the need to treat trans women better? And ultimately, I think it's a case-by-case basis. You need to look to see where the risk is in an individual case. For example, that rapist should never have been in a women's prison, and do it on that basis. What I'm really, and I'm a politician, you, Gloria, were once a politician, people expect the politicians to come up with solutions, not just, as it were, throw large pieces of mud at each other and make absolutely no process. Both transgender people will feel let down, but so will women by this blocking of the bill. The UK government and the Scottish government should sit down and find a solution to the problem, rather than making everybody feel bad. I mean, I think the transgender community feel that the UK government is transphobic, and women feel the Scottish government does not adequately look after their interests. Everybody feels the leadership in their country is poor because they can't agree. One of the things about politicians is they've ultimately got to find solutions. They've not just got to be sounding clever in the way that they put their particular argument. And in that transgender issue, just as in the assisted dying issue, which you asked me about before, just as in relation to the drug issue, they're letting people down. I mean, on the drug issue, how many people do you think have experienced people using illegal drugs in their family? Hundreds of thousands. I suspect that the public are ahead of the politicians in relation to that. And we politicians need to catch up with the mood in the country. Not everybody has the same view, but people are willing to accept change if they think it will be for the better.
Talked about mudslinging in that debate. Has Rosie Duffield been treated fairly by the Labour Party?
People shouldn't have shouted at Rosie Duffield. She is expressing a very legitimate view about women not feeling safe, and people should not be shouting at her. The politicians should be saying, well, look, that is a view we absolutely have to settle. We have to make women who feel what Rosie Duffield feels, and she's not a lone voice. She's expressing a very strongly felt view. And that view has got to be not just accommodated, but it's got to be reflected in the changes in the law that are made. Okay.
Final question. How can I put this? You used to be heavier.
Oh, yes.
I read that. I mean, I remember the weight loss, but I read this took place between 2012 and 2014, because that's right, where you lost over 5 stone by consuming Diet Coke and apples during the day, and you know, you'd have a normal meal at night. Is that right?
That is absolutely right. And many people I meet, particularly doctors or dietitians, say, what a terrible diet. But they would also say, whatever stopped you eating vast quantities at breakfast and vast quantities at lunch, and as many hobnob biscuits as you could eat between 2:30 and 7, that's good. And although, you know, Diet Coke is said to be filled with lots and lots of chemicals, and it's not good for your insides, and it makes your insides feel that you need more sugar, all of that's bad. But if it stopped you putting in all that processed sugar, then whatever is right for you and it reduces weight is the right way to do it.
What do you eat during the day now?
Diet Coke and apples.
You're still doing it?
Yeah, because imagine if, I mean, I've put on weight since 2014, but I don't know, you would remember what I was like in 2012, and I was an obese, unhealthy, unrestrained in eating with no real discipline about what you ate, and it was a bad example, and, you know, more selfishly, bad for me.
Gosh. I mean, a great advert for Diet Coke and apples.
Donald Trump, who is not normally a sage on these matters, he tweeted once, "I've never seen a person who drinks lots and lots of Diet Coke who's thin." Because it makes your body think you want sugar, and that makes you eat more sugar.
Well, I mean, you're the antidote.
Thinner, not thin.
Fun, interesting, political, the perfect life and times. Thanks for sharing them, Lord Falconer.
Thank you very much.